dog has his own podcast spot. And he's, he's so snuggly and cute. I love you, doggies. I love it too, Mama.
Okay, cool. We ready?
Yeah, bring us in.
All right. Howdy, shipmates. Welcome to the Pod Pod Cvlt Cast, where we talk about life, love, learning, and libido, and share our journey through polyamory and kink. This is Max speaking, and to my right...
I'm Hannah.
Oh, that was to your right? Wow, I'm Chastain.
And I'm Eric.
Hey, if you hold up your hands like this one that makes an L, that's your left.
But what if you do this?
I know,
what if
you're
you turn your
screwed.
hands? I'm very confused.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is this me?
This is where the theme music goes. Cvlt Cast.
Pod Pod Cvlt
It's
Cast.
about cults and shit like that.
And sexy time.
Did you say forecast?
Fart.
You'll never know.
Now, Hannah says butts.
Disclaimer.
This is a podcast where we talk about love and relationships, sex and kink, and polyam issues and whatever else comes up. While we talk about those things, we'll probably also touch on stuff like abuse and violence and mental health challenges. Those can be difficult topics, so keep that in mind moving ahead.
So this is our second episode of the podcast, and our first couple of episodes we're focusing on telling our origin stories, how we got to where we are today in polyamory or identity or what have you. And today I'm going to talk about myself a lot. So
Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I'm Chastain.
Hi.
Hi.
How's everybody been in the last week since we recorded?
Well, in the
Man,
last
it's been
week, which
tough.
felt like just a couple of minutes, it really breezed by.
Crazy news, am I right?
Yeah.
Those clowns in Washington.
Oh, and that local sports team. Can't believe that game. So you're probably listening to this on a Tuesday, but we're recording on a Sunday. And we're recording a bunch of episodes on a Sunday altogether, so
Blowing
kind
our
of like
cover.
Jeopardy.
Hey, don't sew how this sausage is made.
You know what? I think that people deserve to know what's in their sausage and on their sausage.
But only by request.
Hey, speaking of sausage, you still have cold leftovers in the fridge. Are you going to eat your cold sausage later? I just want to keep track of your cold sausage
Oh,
devour.
cold sausage. You know that guy.
I haven't forgotten about my cold sausage.
I'm glad you remembered your
Nor
cold
have I
sausage.
forgotten about
Do you,
my cold
do you know
beans.
Eric? You mean cold sausage?
Cold sausage.
know
right
that guy.
over here.
That was your nickname in high school, right? Cold sausage?
I'm trying to make it
Nah.
his nickname now.
Back then it was
Oh,
hot
man.
salami.
That's,
Spicy.
that's some salty hash.
This is some salty hash. Hashtag salty hash. You can follow us on Twitter at Pod Pod Cvlt Cast.
Cult with a V.
Cult with a V. Or Facebook. Or, wherever. Or check out our website. The Pod Cast.
Cold sausage cast.
The Cold Sausage Cast.
That's still cult with a V.
Cult with a V. Cult is always with a V.
Chastain,
Yes, sir.
do you
Yes,
want
Maxwell.
to find a way to lead into your?
Yeah, so it was a Monday, and I was brought into this world through
It
cesarean
was
section.
a cold morning in West Virginia.
I was not born in West
Smoke
Virginia.
flowed from the coal fields.
I was born in Virginia. Thank you very much. Not that West Virginia is a beautiful state. I'm not from there.
Good save.
I am from Virginia. For those of you listening in West Virginia, hey, Nicholas County, shout out. So, yeah, how did I get to where I am today in polyamory? So right now, today, I am married to my partner of 15 or 16 years.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Well,
Which is it, 15 or 16?
who knows? Fuck no. I don't know. I guess it's 16 years, yeah. And Max and I have been married for 11 years of that in September next month.
Right.
And I live with my metamor, Hannah, who is Max's partner. And I am in a relationship. We hit 2 years in October.
It's
Coming up with Eric. And yeah, and the four of us are the pod, and we refer to ourselves as the pod. So that's sort of my current sitch. But getting here was a really long and twisty journey full of mistakes and weird stories and mermaids and to hunt for Red October and all kinds of stuff. So, I come from a conservative Episcopalian background. I grew up in a conservative household, but it was also a household where we did a lot of theater. So I had two main things in my life growing up. The two main things I had were the Episcopal Church, or just church in general, because there was that time where my mom decided we were going to be Catholic because it was trendy in our town. I don't know. I almost converted. I went through catechism classes. It was like a whole thing. But so raised in the Episcopal Church, and we would go to the Episcopal Retreat Center. And so I had a church community and grew up around a church community, but we also did community theater. And community theater, there was this sort of goal-oriented way in which we did everything. And when you're part of a production, which my mom was, and then as a kid, I was just sort of around until I started picking up, like, I don't know, I would do costuming or makeup or sound production or light production or something for shows. And there was just, I had all these experiences where I was around groups of people who really genuinely cared for one another and were affectionate towards one another. And at our Episcopal Retreat Center growing up, I would see the older kids kind of travel in packs, and they seemed to sort of be dating interconnectedly. It seemed like, oh, you know, Johnny has a crush on Marcia, and Renee has a, you know, crush on Marcia, and everybody seems pretty...
Marcia got around.
Yeah, Marcia, like...
She must have had it going on.
Yeah, Marcia was hot, man. So, you know, the teenagers, when we'd go up here for this, it was called Family Conference at that time. I don't know, Shrymont. Can I talk about Shrymont? Is that cool? You think that's okay? Yeah, I'll talk about Shrymont.
We've talked about Virginia
and
the Episcopal Retreat Center. It's not hard to put together.
So Shrymont, the Episcopal Retreat Center, has a camp, and it's basically summer camp for families, and you go up there and stay in this resort, and the kids, like, you're broken into age groups and so forth, and then there's afternoon cocktail hour, which is called porching. So I was kind of raised by a community of adults. You know, I had my mom, I had my granny and my granddaddy and my aunt, but I also had these adults who knew me as a child and were sort of, if they'd see me around while we were at this camp, like, you know, they could parent me. That was fine. So I was raised by a village, you know, that whole it takes a village thing. So the idea of family to me has always been the people that are in your life as opposed to the people that you're related to. And that's an important distinction for me because the people that I'm related to had a lot of toxicity going on in those relationships. My mom was an alcoholic. I was estranged from my biological father for a period of time. I was estranged from my granny and granddaddy for a period of time. My stepfather was very abusive. So there were lots of kind of bad things that happened with my family, the people I was related to. But the people who were in the broader community were sort of my care system and my support system. So I never felt alone. Holidays were always a big deal and things like that. So growing up in this kind of church community, the idea of love was that you just love people and it's okay. It doesn't, you know, old ladies are going to flirt with like the young ladies' husbands, and it's just sort of, you know, the flirty old lady is kind of I think it's a staple in the Episcopal Church. You got the flirty old lady, and then you have the old lady that everybody's scared of, and we had all of that.
And sometimes they're the same one.
Sometimes they're the same. Yeah. And pardon me?
You are working towards both.
Oh yeah, I am fast becoming that. So
Sorry. Can I ask you, you know, I did a little bit of theater stuff too, and it's not just that it's a team pulling together and it's people like caring about each other. It's a really intimate atmosphere too, right? Like,
yeah,
so,
you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I grew up in community theater, and I was the only kid really who was doing stuff, and I was around a bunch of adults. I didn't have friends my age really. I just sort of had the adults, and I related to them. I flirted with adults. There was a lot of sort of maybe questionable stuff looking back on it. But, you know, I went skinny dipping with my teachers who were also involved in the community theater. We had cast parties. You know, I could drink around these people. My mom would smoke pot with people that were my age in the parking lot, you know. So there was a lot of closeness and intimacy. And it was somebody that, you know, for a period of 6 to 8 weeks leading up to a production, you saw several times a week, and you saw them in this environment where you had to lay it all on the table because acting is hard and you have to bring who you are to any role that you play. So you have these people having this experience together that's very intimate, and it creates a bond. And there's a lot of playfulness in that. And there was a lot of playfulness in the community, the church community growing up. So family was really this like playful, loving, supportive thing. And relatives, separately from that, were kind of a scary, awful thing for me. When I grew up, when I became an adult and started having relationships myself, I I didn't have a good and healthy model for romantic relationships, but I knew that there was something different about the way that I loved. And
so you were already developing ideas about chosen family versus family of origin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, sexually, I was going through a lot as well. You know, I was 15 when I discovered kink, thanks to Gary Marshall, who created Laverne and Shirley, who also directed or produced
everything.
Exit to Eden. No, the movie Exit to Eden was sort of a turning point for me, and that's that terrible movie about the kinky BDSM island that Rosie O'Donnell and Dan Aykroyd end up on. Mm-hmm. To solve a caper with some film or jewels or something. And Iman is also in this movie, and Dana Delaney. And in that movie, that was the first time I saw people being themselves sexually. But one of the big themes of that movie is that the woman who runs this island started out as a very submissive person. And to protect herself, she became a dominant person. And the idea that people could choose who they are and how they are was really important to me at that point in time, because I was going through a lot in my life that was very bad and negative, and I needed an idea of who to be. And I'm autistic, which I wasn't diagnosed until my 30s, but I'm autistic. So modeling and mirroring behaviors were a big part of how I survived in school. I was always the weird kid. I was always the outcast. So being in the short community and being in the theater community really gave me a place to be myself in a safe way. Mm-hmm. So I learned that, you know, community relationships, quote unquote, were a safe place for Chastain to be Chastain. Everywhere else in the world was not a safe place. I was also very closeted bisexual in my teens. And it was that bisexuality that entering into my first serious relationship, which was with my baby daddy, I got knocked up at 19, moving in with him and living with him and moving away from my mother. You know, I had a very codependent relationship with my mom because she drank. Moving away from that, I really put my baby daddy in kind of a parental role for me because I was still growing up. I was just a kid. You know, he was 27, but I was just a kid. When sex things came up and my bisexuality came up, I was like, well, could we mess around with a girl? You know, could we maybe like have a threesome? And I had most of my sexual discovery experiences with that person. So when he was like, yeah, sure, I've got this ex-girlfriend who might be interested in messing around. And then we did that. And he was weird about it because he'd had girlfriends in the past who became lesbians after they dated. And
well,
he was,
hold on. Let's be careful here. They didn't become lesbians. That's not how that works.
Okay, this is how he viewed it.
Yeah.
His experience was that women started just dating women after they dated him. That was his experience. Right. Okay. So they discovered their queerness through dating him. And and that was a real point, a pet peeve for him. And so my bisexuality, my identity was a problem for him because he was scared he was going to lose me to ladies. And the whole time I was just like, no, I want to fuck ladies with you. Like, so he and I messed around with this girl, and then he and we got our first apartment together and we had a baby together. And so I was a young mom out in the city. And when I was 22, 2002 was my year of promiscuity. And 2002 was the year that I signed up for things like Adult Friend Finder. And OkCupid was a very different place at that time in 2002. There was Nerve.com. There were a bunch of just personal sites I signed up for. Match.com. Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah. You know, so my son's father and I broke up while we were living together. He told me he fell out of love with me, and I couldn't be in a relationship with somebody who didn't love me anymore. I didn't understand at that time that you don't have to be in love, quote unquote, and excited about somebody to be with them and work on something. That wasn't something until Max I learned about with our marriage. You know, I grew up a lot in our marriage together. So he and I broke up, and I started fucking anything that would fuck me. And it was this time, you know, I didn't realize it then, but I know it now that I have a problem with sex addiction, that I was really wrapping my self-worth up in, could I get somebody to fuck me? And Max, it was during the year of promiscuity and being on all those websites, that's when you and I started talking. Yeah. And I thought you were far too handsome for me. Far too handsome. So I kept turning you down. And finally, you and I saw each other. We went and saw, Mitch Hedberg was there.
Right.
Dave Attell. Was it the Dave Attell show downtown?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we passed each other at the Dave Attell show, and you were like, hey, was this you at the Dave Attell show? And then I was like, well, yeah, but did you see the hot blonde chick I was with? Because at the time I was dating a guy and we were trying to nail this blonde chick. Because, like, apparently my modus operandi in life is just, like, date straight dudes so I can use them as my in to fuck girls because I'm bad with women. I'm the worst lesbian.
I don't know if you've not got that backwards.
Do you think dudes are dating me to get to ladies?
No, but you've definitely
I'm excited.
It has been a perk that's come with the territory.
A perk of dating me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, Chastain.
Best wingman ever.
I'm the best wingman ever?
Yeah, I'll go along with that. You're pretty good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Oh, that's really sweet, actually. That makes me feel good because I have no game.
No,
whatsoever.
I have no game.
You have enough game. So, where was I? I don't remember what I was saying.
Hot chick at the...
Right.
Oh, yeah, hot
you
chick.
And
so
I
was
spotted
like,
each other.
So I was like, hey, Max, did you see this other chick I was with? Because...
Yeah.
I couldn't conceptualize that somebody would be attracted to me. I had no self-esteem whatsoever because I'd come from a history of trauma and abuse, and I was an undiagnosed autistic person just trying to make her way in the world, and social things were scary. I couldn't order my own food in restaurants. I had trouble going to the grocery store. I had no independence. I learned how to write a check when I was 21 or 22. And here I was raising a baby with a person that was ultimately not right for me. That relationship ended. Year of promiscuity happened. Then I met Max in 2003. So prior to meeting you, though, I hooked up with a couple of couples. Mm-hmm. And it was a really bad experience. And it wasn't me actually having sex with them. It was just sort of the chick makes out with me and then they fuck and then I'm just there. But I didn't drive, so then it would be like one of them has to give me a ride home. You know, I was in a band around the time and I had a problem with boundaries. Big problem with boundaries. So I would just sort of like fuck anybody who expressed interest. So I really racked up my numbers in 2002, 2003. I dated a guy. He was sort of my in for getting involved with stuff like Suicide Girls, the website, and I found an online community on Suicide Girls where I sort of kind of branched out. I branched out in my queerness and being open about it. I really feel like I came out in my early 20s. I never came out to my family. I never talked to anybody. And I didn't have a concept of polyamory at that time. Right. I just knew of Skinamax had taught me you can fuck more than one person at a time. And I wanted to do that all the time. I wanted to have sex all the time. And that was really my driving force. So Max, when you and I met and we had a really great first date and we fucked on the first date and the sex was so good. I just knew that there was something different and that was right. And you and I really entered into swinging together. Mm-hmm. But that took a little while. Like, our first swinging experiences weren't until you moved into the city to be closer. Because you'd been living with your sister and you and I were dating. And then you moved into the city and you were, I don't know, 12 blocks away, something like that. Yeah. And
a short bike ride.
Yeah, short bike ride. And you bought me a bicycle, and that was really sweet. So our first experiences as swinging or threesomes or what have you, or at that time,
well, we were unicorn hunting.
Yeah, we were definitely unicorn.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. We were absolutely unicorn hunters, and unicorn hunters are people who use their couple privilege to fuck someone else, and that person doesn't necessarily have agency with that couple. Like, they're just basically a sexual object and not, yeah. Right. No, I do a much better job about that now, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. I mean, we evolved in that together.
Yes. Yeah. So you and I had our first experience, and that was when I realized that I had a physical sensation that indicated, oh, this is a boundary and this is upsetting. So you and I were having I think it was our first full-on threesome, because we had like sort of make out and do sexy times and have sex around people. But when we had our first full-blown threesome, there was a point where we were having sex and the gal told you that you could come inside of her because she was on birth control. That made my stomach hurt, and I needed things to stop. And I think I reached out and said, like, I need this to stop at this point. Right. That was probably one of the last times that I did a good job of setting a boundary for myself in my relationship with you and our relationship with swinging, because I wanted sex all the time. And I thought that to keep you and be in a relationship with you, I needed to be just as open-minded as possible. And we would joke, and you would tell me that me being sexually permissive was a big bonus to you. And it made you, it brought you happiness. Right. So I identified that as, this is a feature that I must have. I didn't realize that I was demisexual at the time. And demisexuality is when you really require a more romantic connection to feel comfortable. So you and I would have like sex, and we were in a relationship, and our relationship was sort of fraught with things because we were in our 20s and, just you and I fuck ups with addiction issues. Yeah. And so when we would have sex with other people, if I wanted to do it, really wanted to do it, because it was that casual thing, I still had this feeling 1 or 2 days later, or even immediately after, that I'd done something wrong. And it felt really bad and really harmful. And we kept doing it. And then we would be in situations where you were really into somebody and I had to kind of take one for the team. And that was damaging to my psyche. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know how to take care of myself. And I didn't know how to set boundaries that I do now.
And that's something that later, like not now while you're in the middle of your story, but later we should talk a lot more about, because it's really, really common, the idea of taking one for the team.
Yeah.
And it sucks,
dude.
It
sucks so hard.
Yeah.
It sucks so hard.
It's no good.
It's upsetting. I think the best lesson I've ever learned in life is it's either fuck yes or it's a no. Mm-hmm. Either I feel like fuck yeah about something, or I'm not going to do it. And I want the other person who's doing something with me to have that same feeling. Being an adult now and having that in my relationships is so magical, because I feel like everybody's really raring to go and excited to be here. And at the time, there were times when I was not excited to be there. There were times when you, Max, were not excited to be there. Mm-hmm. And that was difficult. And it wasn't until you and I, so we had a system for swinging. We would write ads on Craigslist. We had a joint email box, and we would manage our hitting on ladies on the internet together. And it was a system. It was work. It was every day checking and replying and posting and rotating our ads. Right. And we would have ads for specific fetish things, and we would have ads for just like, we want to meet a couple to hang out with. And we would have experiences with couples that we really liked, and then they'd kind of blow us off, and we're like, oh, we felt shitty about ourselves, and we would argue. And then we would have experiences where they kind of sucked, but we were just like, okay, I guess we can do this again.
Right.
Afterwards, I think, I'm trying to remember, I guess it was the Christmas present that really brought relationship things into it. When I mean the Christmas present, I placed a Craigslist ad for you to have a girl to fuck while I was not around, because we weren't living together and you had moved out of the city, and we were seeing each other maybe once a week. And typically when we were seeing each other, I was also bringing my son along, because we were having like family dinner nights on Wednesdays. So we didn't have a lot of alone time to just have sex and be intimate together. And so I placed this Craigslist ad to find a lady for you to fuck, because I wanted your needs to be met. And I wanted to make sure that I was still, quote unquote, keeping you, which is a completely unhealthy, toxic thing. But that's mindset at the time. So we found a lady, and you would like have dinner with her and have sex. Yeah, and that was the relationship.
Yeah, we met the evening of Christmas Day.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2017? No, 2016.
No. This is Chess. This is much.
No, I'm sorry, 2006. 2006. Sorry.
So yeah, we met. She came over the first time, Christmas Day evening. Yeah. Was the best day that worked, and we couldn't find a place that we were sure was open to meet publicly, so she just came over, and then that carried on into the summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and you and I had a group sex experience with that person, and I was trying to befriend her, and I think that at that time we were having a situation where she was a metamor and you two were dating, you were dating casually. But I was really trying to make that unicorn relationship happen. And she would express, I just want to have alone time with Max. And I had uncomfortable feelings about that, because I felt jealous. And I felt like it was taking something away from me. And it absolutely wasn't at the time. But that was our first relationship where another person was around on a long-term basis.
And I don't know that it's important to the narrative, but this was a person who was coming out of a difficult marriage. I'm tap dancing around whether or not I should say abusive, but I don't think it really matters.
Well, I think, and also like a religiously repressive background.
Right.
So that's my dog, Oliver. Oliver is a really terrible puggle. He's gorgeous. And we don't give him a microphone because he's kind of an asshole.
The petamore demands to be heard.
The petamore.
Abusive, not abusive.
Yeah. So we come across a lot of these women and men. I know that there are men out there, but they're less likely. The culture is that they're less likely to talk about their feelings. Not to make a generalization, but that's my experience. So I think that was our first experience dating other people.
Right, and we started then playing with domestic fantasies.
Yes.
Because
we were talking about like, oh, this woman's got a kid. We could add on to the bachelor pad. We could build some rooms. We could make it happen. But we weren't including that person's feelings in any of that. We were just sort of fantasizing about living together in this little commune of poly stuff.
Right.
And like everybody's fucking each other and it's all happy and good.
And I think at that point we were like at least aware of the word polyamory.
We were.
Yeah.
We were
talking
aware.
about ideas about polyamory, but we didn't really know anything about.
Yeah, I don't think at that time I identified as polyamorous.
No, probably not.
I feel like when we started dating a couple before we got married, another couple we met off Craigslist. She was 18 at the time, and he was.
I think she was. It doesn't matter, but
yeah, she was young.
Whatever. Yeah,
and we were in our later 20s.
Yeah,
and he was like 20 something, right?
Yeah.
And so we were dating this couple, and we started seeing that couple a lot, seeing that couple all the time and doing things with that couple that were not just fucking. Yeah. And then they broke up. And so you and I, this is 2008, you and I are working towards our wedding. She's my maid of honor. Mm-hmm. And she's a girlfriend.
Yeah, she's essentially our girlfriend.
She was our girlfriend at that time.
Family day trips with us, and
she was around our kid,
hung out at the house just kind of casually.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had this person in our life who was spending a lot of time with us, a lot of cuddle time, a lot of comfy time, a lot of domestic time, and that was our first relationship. And boy, howdy, did we fuck that up. Mm-hmm. We fucked that up because I was, I just didn't have any self-esteem at all. And I was so insecure, and I could not deal with the idea of love. And there were ways that you two would be around each other, and a way that she would be with me, and a dynamic that the three of us had, and all of them were different, and I didn't understand how that could be. And it was so confusing and upsetting. And there weren't books or resources that I knew about. I'm sure they were out there, but I didn't know about them. And, I'm an avid web researcher, so I was looking. And this was also around the time that I started working on my sex addiction recovery and started kind of working those steps and trying to figure out, and you didn't know this at the time. I wasn't talking about it, but 2009 and 2010, I had books at my desk at work where I was really trying to read about it and stuff. And, I thought maybe check out some groups or something, but I never made it out. I got to the second step, and that was where I stalled.
It's the same 12-step across the board,
yeah,
right?
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's all the same. So, I had that going on and a lot of stress at work. And so that was just stressful. So I had emotional stuff going on. She was young and had her own emotional stuff and her own baggage. And then you had your stuff. And she kept trying to moderate our relationship when you and I would fight. And we were just having, young couple kind of living together fights and stuff.
Right. We were in our first year of living together.
Yeah. And that was difficult for me. And again, I'm autistic and I hadn't been diagnosed. So I didn't understand why it was so difficult. And it was also during that time that I realized this sort of 1950s household fantasy that I had, and I especially had going into my relationship with you, did not work for me at all. I was really bad at following instructions, really bad at being just kind of, really bad at submitting. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be submissive. But so part of what I could do, I could fuck people with you. I could make that happen. I could make sure we had a steady supply of fucking people. But I was really compromising myself a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard. And dealing with starting to work on sex addiction stuff helped me realize that if somebody having sex with me does not equal my self-esteem, one, and I feel really crappy and have this sort of chemical crash after this happens where I just want to die because I feel like I'm this horrible, horrible slut that's just dirty.
Right.
And, there are no number of baths that can fix that mental place that you're in.
Yeah, and I would know that was coming or that something negative was coming.
Yeah.
So I was always loaded up with anxiety about, like, this is a fun experience that we're going into that's going to not be fun.
Chastain's going to have
pretty much immediately after.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we're going to feel distant from each other, and it's like,
Yeah, because you and I don't have the type of dynamic where we make up after arguments. We're just sort of distant and awful for about a week, and then we kind of figure it out, and then we're start acting normal again. Yeah, so that was a difficult time. I was really scared in my life right after we got married. I was really uncomfortable in my life and with myself and with everything that we were doing, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And there were times when you and I would have discussions about the domestic dream of living with somebody, living with a metamor. We didn't even have the word metamor at that time. Right. A metamor is just a partner of your partner. Gracious me. Like, we would go through these times where I would say to myself, oh, I'm not polyamorous. I can't do this. And you would say to me, well, you seemed okay with it last week, but now you're not okay. Like, the idea of consent hadn't even really entered into our relationship. We went through that for a couple of years, and then we moved into our new home after your parents passed away. And my work stuff changed, and my medical stuff changed. And then Tinder came along, and Tinder really was the thing that opened up our relationship.
Yeah. I had heard about it on a specific podcast, like they were joking about this Tinder thing. So I think, and I told you I was going to leave this to you because you remember details and chronology better, but I'm still jumping in. I think I was like, hey, look at this app I downloaded because I heard about it on a podcast. Like, isn't this weird and funny?
Well, and I had a blog about our poly adventures, which were really just a blog about our swinging adventures at the time. Right. But I had a blog about where I was writing about what we were doing and what was going on. Hannah, Eric, when did you guys first discover Tinder? How did Tinder enter into your lives?
It was after moving back to America, and that would have been 2017, so not very long ago.
Not very long. Eric is not up on things.
No, not at all.
Eric lives under a rock. Hannah?
I was never on Tinder. Still not on Tinder.
Really?
Yeah,
Hannah and I met
OkCupid because
I liked anomaly now.
I liked the long survey format and like all the questions on OkCupid, and that it felt it's changed a lot now. They've got a swipe game and they're being like everyone else, which is whatever. But it felt really different than all of the apps, and I just never got into that.
It does. Hey, you and I met in person, but then talked on OkCupid, and that was how dating came out of
Absolutely. I was not comfortable meeting people, chatting people up in person.
Yeah, but you were pretty charming on the OkCupid, if I do say so. Because Hannah and I have a history. We dated for about 6 months?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, yeah. Yeah, Tinder really opened up our relationship. Tinder was, that was when and I think we talked about this a little bit in our first episode, which you can check out through our website, podpodcvltcast.com. That's cult with a V. We talked about the fact that, one of us, I think it was you, said, like, I think I might want to get coffee with this person.
Yeah, I trying to be self-searching about my, like, intentions and stuff and honesty. I really do think I started using it to play the hot or not game.
Yeah.
Because, there was a period in time when hotornot.com was actually a thing, and I've spent a lot of time, like, hottering or nottering people because it's a fun game to play. And that's really the way I use Tinder. And then, like, I actually started having conversations that I was like, oh, this person's actually kind of interesting. And it would be interesting to actually meet this person in person.
See them face to face. IRL. There's something I was going to mention there. Oh, so there was this weird thing that you and I did with Tinder, because this is 2012. This is when this is all happening. And Tinder's there, and we're both on Tinder, and we're both sort of trying to start dating people. And Max and I had a lot of conversations about going out with people and having that first date, but not really talking about the fact that we were married, and just sort of seeing what would happen afterwards when we told them that we were married, and sort of like a fake out situation. And I think we quickly learned that going into it and trying, because we wanted to, basically I had a blog at the time, and we wanted to, like, get data and do
a social experiment.
Yeah, have a social experiment, because I think we realized the ethics were questionable,
right.
and that you don't just play with people like that. So we didn't do that. And we started, making sure we put up front in our profile that we were married and that we were poly and that we had an open relationship. And you got lots of dates. I did not, because I'm just not picky. Mm-hmm. I'm really picky. And when I would go on dates from OkCupid or Tinder, like, they would typically end in some kind of unwanted thing. Like, there was usually a consent violation. Mm-hmm. And again, I didn't have the language to talk about consent at that time. Mm-hmm. So as recently as 2012, like, I didn't fucking know about consent. I knew about permission, but I didn't know about consent. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of times that I was just, getting touched in ways I didn't want to be touched at the end of a date, and just going like, oh, I guess I have to just put up with this. Like, thank goodness for cultural progression right now, and the women's movement and the queer movements and the people of color movements and the consent movement and all that stuff, because I don't think I'd be who I am today without it.
Right. So
yeah, we started dating around, and then you and I dated people together, kind of unsuccessfully at mm-hmm. times. And then you had a relationship that was really bad for you and I, mm-hmm. and very toxic for you and I, and created a lot of harm and a lot of feelings. And that was really when you and I started having better conversations. I feel like we started reading the books. We started trying to work on who we were as people mm-hmm. and our marriage and all that stuff. And also being more accepting of the other person having this life and identity. Because I had no self-esteem. It came from this environment of really strong codependency. And then I had to learn how to be okay with myself and how to spend time alone and not follow you around the house, mm-hmm. because I would follow you around the house, and how to not feel sad when you were with other people, and how to realize that had nothing to do with me. Those are all really learned experiences that I had with you. Mm-hmm. And I think you've said this too, like, we grew up in right. polyamory in our marriage, and I think our other partners really do benefit from our foibles along the way. And then I met Hannah in 2015, 16, 2016?
15, 16.
2015? Yeah, I think 2015-ish.
Can I interject something? Go back a couple years before that?
Yeah.
I think a really, really major turning point was that we found, through a friend of one of the couples that we were dating, I think, we found a local group that was centered around polyamory, and it just so happened they were also a crossover polyamory kink group. And we started going to munches, which were formatted as discussion groups.
Yes.
And it was a big turning point to start to learn phrases and what to call feelings and stuff like that. And I remember that I was having the first short little fling that I had dating somebody alone when mm-hmm. we went to the first meeting. And she was a woman, like I was describing last time, who didn't identify, had been in a multiple partner relationship. That one didn't work for her. She, didn't identify as polyamorous, non-monogamous, any of the terminology. And I remember saying to you after, I think the first one of those that we went to, that first discussion group thing, saying like, oh, I need to date somebody who will come to this kind of thing with me or with us.
Yes.
And that didn't stop me from dating 2 or 3 more times women who were just okay with it.
Yeah.
Not
enthusiastic consent.
Right.
Not fuck yes.
Just okay with it.
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah. I understand that you have a wife and all, but like, I need you to spend more time with me. And yeah. So like, backtracking even further from that. So, I was on Suicide Girls and had all these sort of online friendships, but there was a point in time when Suicide Girls changed their website format and I was beta testing for them. And I pointed out some security features and got kicked off their website. And so my flock of Suicide Girls friends ended up in 2 places. We ended up in private Facebook groups, and we ended up on FetLife. And FetLife was really where that was 2011. No, that was 2013, I guess, when we ended up on FetLife. And I feel like that's really when we branched out, because we had been going out and kind of going to the local fetish club mm-hmm. since 2010.
Introduced by your sister.
Introduced by my sister. Thanks, sister. I love you. So we've been doing that and having those experiences and kind of around kink stuff and fetish stuff and alternative scene stuff, but we hadn't been around support systems for polyamory. So it was really 2013 where getting on FetLife, we suddenly had access to this calendar of like, oh, here are these groups that meet, here are these events that we could go to and learn and grow as people. And we did. We started dating within that pool of people. And that was when we started making better choices for ourselves and with each other about what our relationship could be. And we started reading the resources. I personally have never been a big fan of, what's that website?
More Than Two?
More Than Two. Never been. And I know that there's been a lot of stink lately about the creator of More Than Two and consent issues in his relationships and assault issues, or I think maybe in his relationships. I could be misspeaking, so don't quote me on that. But the book Opening Up is the book that I recommend to everyone. And we'll make sure to put a link in the show notes. You can find our show notes on our website.
What's that website?
The website is www.podpodcvltcast.com.
Cult with a V.
But I think that book really gives a good model of here's what a polyamorous relationship can be. Mm-hmm. Here are things that fall under the umbrella of polyamory, which includes swinging, which is basically polyfuckery. Mm-hmm. Here are different ways to do a polyamorous relationship. And it had a workbook for a relationship agreement. And that relationship agreement was fucking life-changing for me. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly you and I had on a Google Doc, on a piece of paper somewhere, a thing that said, let's not argue after 9 o'clock. I'm not saying that we did it. We totally suck at that. But let's not have an important discussion after 9 p.m. Here are the things that I'm comfortable with you doing in other relationships. Here are the things that you're comfortable with me doing in the other. Like, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me at the time was you were not comfortable with me dating another very dominant alpha person because you're kind of an alpha dude.
Yeah. And that was a insecurity issue and snorting and pawing the ground kind of issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think...
And it was also an issue of not having experience with that, because having had experience with that later, like, everybody's pretty much just cool about it.
We're
like,
all just people.
Like, dudes don't, pound their chest a whole lot around each other.
Well, you too.
I mean, but that's literal chest pounding.
You and Eric just chest pounding all the time.
Yeah.
And pounding each other's chests, real strange. It's real weird.
Feels good.
That's just called punching.
Oh, okay. I mean, you do you. Like, I support you in your wants and desires.
In any
event. So, yada, yada, yada. Moving along. Totally
you were already yada, yada, yada-ing. So
yeah.
You had already lost your train of thought.
I had lost my train of thought. Okay, I'm sorry.
So we've gone to the groups. We've learned the terminology. We've done the reading. Oh, here's what I wanted to ask you. You were talking about opening up.
Yeah.
You have read Sex at Dawn. I have not.
Yeah.
Is that one that you recommend about the topic? Or
I recommend Sex at Dawn as a look at human sexuality. I don't really feel like it's a good polyamory relationship resource. Mm-hmm. And my experience with the people who are proponents of Sex at Dawn, and this is just my experience, is that they seem to take a polyamory is better than monogamy stance. I don't believe that at all. I think relationship styles are what works for you. There's no right way to do anything.
Right.
And so, in talking about the resources, there were not a lot of resources for who I was as a person in my mid-30s, 39 years old. And there were not a lot of places that gave me good information about how to have an open relationship that worked for me as a queer person, that really spoke to who I was. And there certainly were therapeutic resources. Mm. I went to therapists and they would tell me that my relationship style was wrong or damaging me. Mm. And I would believe it because, oh gosh, what if I am just giving too much of myself away? Mm. And it wasn't that the problem wasn't our relationship style. The problem was that I didn't know how to set boundaries. So because there were no therapeutic resources for me, that's when I found coaching. And I started working with a coach, and coaching focused more on like moving forward with skills and tools and coping stuff in my toolbox, as opposed to focusing on all the traumas that had gotten me to where I was. I realized like, oh, there's no place for somebody like me to go and just talk to somebody about their relationship and get some advice. So I became that person. I started, doing certifications and learning up and doing the reading to get those skills and work on stuff. Now, being an alternative life and relationship coach certainly does not make me better at relationships. I still make as many mistakes as I always did, but at least I have the tools to talk about them and communicate better about them and so forth. So, Hannah, you and I dated for about 6 months, and we had an excellent relationship except for the things that we were fraught with. But you started dating Max during that period of time as well. That was really challenging for me because I did have a lot of possessiveness issues, and I get very protective of the people that I'm with, and I just sort of want to keep them all to myself. And not in a controlling way, just in a these are people I love, and I want people I love to be accessible to me at all times.
So we had 2 other experiences with dating women as more of a triangle, and this was an experience
we were dating the same person separately. Right.
As parallel dating.
Right.
We have figured out that neither one works for us.
Neither one works.
For us.
Yeah. You don't cross the streams.
Yeah.
For us.
Certainly, there are many happy triads in the world. But,
absolutely.
But for us, we just can't do it.
Doesn't work out. Yeah. And, it doesn't mean that I still love everybody. I love you all. But yeah, it doesn't, there are feelings and insecurities that I have about my relationship with you, Max, that I cannot overcome as easily as I could in, say, a relationship with Eric. Like, if Eric and I were dating the same person, I would probably have less of that insecurity, jealousy feelings, because that's just who I am as a person now, and that's the only person that, Eric, you've ever known. You've only known me as confident and secure and comfortable in my skin. Sorry, I need to talk towards the mic. So here we are today. Hannah has moved in with us, and that's going pretty well, I think. I feel very happy about it. I had fears about Hannah moving in. Hannah, I was worried that I was going to be, unfair to you. And I was also worried that I would feel like the situation was unfair because there's a level of intimacy that you and Max have that Max and I just don't have as part of our relationship any longer. We did it at time, but we just don't have that anymore. It's just not who we are together. Mm-hmm. And that's not bad or wrong. It's just how it is. And I have something I call historical feelings, which is when a feeling comes up, but it's really triggered by something that happened in the past. And so it's not a feeling that's right here in the present. It's not based in the reality of now. Mm-hmm. I, with the whole moving in conversation, had a lot of historical feelings about not feeling enough, not feeling wanted, not feeling like a good wife, feeling like I just had to go along with it to make Max happy and stuff like that. And that's all just old bullshit that was sort of coming up as this new and exciting adventure for us was coming out. And I think with any new and exciting adventure, we always have fears that sort of come out. But we did a good job, I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, of communicating about those fears and worries. And a lot of those were put aside to me. I've engaged with a therapist this summer. I hadn't been working with a therapist for about 1.5 years. So I re-engaged in therapy and did that really hardcore for about a month using Talkspace. And
not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor, but a positive experience for me. There's breakthrough.com. There are lots of online therapy things. I prefer to be able to text and write because, again, I'm autistic and I communicate better in that way. So I needed that support at the time, but I don't feel like in the need now. Mm-hmm. Now I feel like, okay, I've handled that. And now I'm ready to move forward. Mm-hmm. And now I'm really excited about the domesticity and the meal planning and the, working on the podcast with you guys and just creating a good life, a good life full of purpose, a good life full of giving to other people. And I feel like I'm accomplishing that. And I'm really happy with where I am now in my life and in my relationships. So, and then I met Eric in 2017. 2017, we started dating. In 2017, we met on Tinder. Eric is not a polyamorous person. He had nothing about polyamory on his profile. He had some woodwork he had done, and I contacted you about this woodwork that you had done. And everybody's gesturing at me to point at them to talk into the mic.
Well, you keep looking at me.
I know.
When
I'm
you
sorry.
reference me.
I'm sorry. Well, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna cut my eyes over to you. So, I started dating, and I had questions about your woodwork, and you had questions about polyamory.
About working the wood.
No, I'm pretty sure I brought up working the wood. That seems more my style. Eric was the first person that I've really dated that I would define as kink and poly adjacent at the time of meeting him. And now, here we are in this like successful poly relationship. That's probably one of the healthier relationships I've had. And that is healthy because as a result of all the learning and growing that I did with you, Max.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have said that I was either kink or poly adjacent at the time because...
Yeah.
Not even adjacent.
No, it wasn't even a thing that had entered my head. But I guess I'll get into that in my episode.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to talk about Eric and Hannah's experiences coming up in the next 2 episodes.
So you just did it, but put a fine point on it and nail down where you are today. Who
I am today. Who's whom. So, I'm Chastain. I am married to Max. I live with my metamor Hannah, who is also my friend. I am in a relationship with Eric, and Eric is friends with Max and friends with Hannah. And I feel good about the way that I have relationships now. I feel good about the level of communication in my relationships. I feel like there's still a lot of room for me to grow and a lot of self-development that I need to do to... there's no such thing as being good at polyamory. There's only being a good person. And I'm trying really hard to be a good person that leaves anybody that I come into contact with better than they were when I met them. And that's really my goal in life now. Right.
Which is Dan Savage's campfire rule, right?
Yeah.
Or campsite rule, rather.
Yeah. Leave it better than you found it.
Better than you found
yeah. Leave a relationship, leave a person better than you found them.
And we've had a tendency to, when we were dating together, we had a tendency to date women that were a lot younger than us. And
I still like dating women that are a lot younger than me.
That's yeah, I don't know what we just did there. And I think that's really important. I came into that phrase late listening to Dan Savage's podcast, and it is really important. It's a thing to keep in mind and to consider, and it all falls under the heading of don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Which you'll learn in any poly or kink 101 anywhere. Don't be a dick and learn how to park in the right place.
Right.
So, all right, well.
What time are we at?
We're wrapping up.
Okay.
We're wrapping up. I think we can go ahead and wrap this up. So, I just want to thank our patrons on Patreon, and we'll insert a little blurb about you there. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can reach us at www.patreon.com/Pod Pod Cvlt Cast.
Cult with a V.
Always cult with a V. And we have different membership levels, and you get a little bit of swag, or you just get our undying love and affection. And, we're polyamorous, so we have a lot to go around. It's not pie. Relationships are not pie. Love is not pie. I think Hannah says that a lot.
Pie is love.
Pie is love. God, fucking pie is good, right? We have tiramisu. We have tiramisu in the fridge. We should totally shout out on tiramisu. Anyway, sorry. I get sidetracked by how handsome Eric is.
If you're enjoying the Pod Pod Cvlt Cast, you can thank our Patreon subscribers, Jenny and Sydney. They've made our theme music possible. To thank them, we'll be sending them some sweet Pod Pod swag and give them access to exclusive content. If you'd like to be awesome like Jenny and Sydney, head over to www.patreon.com/Pod Pod Cvlt Cast. That's cult with a V, and choose your subscription level. Each level comes with its own fun perks. Thank you so much, Jenny and Sydney.
So, and make sure you like our podcast and review, and check us out on all the podcast programs out there in the world, and visit our website, podpodcvltcast.com.
Thanks, Jess. That was a lot. That was really vulnerable and detailed, and thank you. That was great. You did a great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You've just heard the Pod Pod Cvlt Cast with your hosts, Max, Chastain, Hannah, and Eric. Our theme song is Spencer Blues by Lobo Loco. Our break music is by Gabbarino. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or your favorite podcast destination. Thanks for listening.